Morning, Mr. Klug.
Good morning, Mr.
Yesterday we were talking about phone calls with your wife, and I'm going to come back to that, but let me back up for a moment and get some more background. You indicated you started this office in Appleton, Wisconsin for Stiefel Nicholas September 30th of 1998, is that right?
That's correct.
And prior to that, you had been working for Baird for 8 years, true?
Correct.
And also working for you at Baird was a secretary named Stacy Bauer, correct?
That's correct.
How long did you work with her at Baird?
Stacy worked at Baird, I believe, about 5 years.
And then she came over to Stiefel Nicholas with you to start the new office.
That's correct.
And she worked for you for a couple years at Stiefel Nicholas?
Yes.
And there was another secretary there whose name at the time was Joan Wise, true?
At the time was Joan Colby.
Oh, it's Joan Wise now and it was Joan Colby.
And technically it was Stacy Douglas at the time. She's married now.
Okay. And what name do you know her by?
Who?
Joan.
Joan Colby, I know her.
Joan Colby? Okay. And Joan Colby had worked for you for how long at Baird?
Joan worked for me at Baird from 1990 to 98.
And then she worked for you for several years at Stiefel?
That's correct, until she was fired.
And Mr. Klug, I don't want to be rude, but really, you need to just answer the question that's asked. If we want to bring out that other information, I can ask you or Mr. Jamboys can ask you, okay?
Objection, Your Honor. I don't think the normal person would consider that answer to be not responsive to the question that was
Well, I
posed.
think it would be on what was asked, so I have to agree with Mr. Albee. Can you gentlemen come up for a moment, though, please?
So Joan Wise came over with you as well, correct?
Correct.
And worked for you for a total of 10, 11 years?
Correct.
You also worked at Baird with a man named Ron Ruck, true?
That's correct.
And he became co-manager of that Stiefel Nicholas office with you in Appleton, right?
Eventually, yes.
You two have been co-branch managers since 1999?
Yes, but I had my license first. He received his about 3 months after mine.
And this license issue, you had a Series 7 license at the time?
One of the licenses, yes.
And you needed a Series 8 license in order to run that office?
That's correct.
So Stiefel put Mark Jensen here nominally in charge of the office, right?
He was in charge of the office, correct.
But he worked in Racine,
That's correct.
and he wasn't presiding over day-to-day functions. You and Ron were handling those, right?
No, he was responsible for the signing of the daily trades, the day-to-day functions, yes.
Well, and when I say presiding over what's going on in that office, you're doing all the managing of all the employees, right?
Technically, Ron was in charge of personnel.
Okay. You and Ron are making all the decisions about the trades you want to pursue, right?
Please repeat that.
You and Ron are making all of the trade decisions yourselves, and then Mark just basically rubber stamped them for you,
Are you
right?
talking about trades that I do for my customers?
Right.
Yes, Mark had nothing to do with the recommendations that I make for my clients.
And you just would mail the trades to Mark once a week, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And he'd just approve them in that fashion, right?
Well, I would hope he would review them and then approve them and then send them back to us.
That's all he was doing to run that office is look at those trades once a week, right?
Technically, he was responsible for any aspect of the office as we were IEs in charge, but he was responsible for the regulatory part of the office.
I'm just asking, in terms of what he actually did, that was pretty much it, right? Is just to review those trades and approve them, right?
Any form that needed a legal signature, that would be Mark Jensen.
Okay. And he never, and you received your license in what, January, February 1999?
I received it March 15th of 99.
And so at that time, he was no longer your boss in any way, shape, or form?
That's correct.
And did he ever come up to Appleton between October 1 and March 15?
He was up during the opening of our office.
And that was October 1.
Yes, I believe so.
And he never came up again until you took over the office.
I don't know if Mark came up beyond that.
You have no recollection of him coming up whatsoever, true?
Mark was not in my office beyond the opening of the office.
Oh, so you do remember that he never came up?
Like I said, in my office. You're asking if he came up. Are you talking about my office or to Appleton?
Well, I'm not asking if you went to the Applebee's in Appleton or something like that. I'm asking, did he come up and visit the Appleton office of Stiefel Nicholas, which was actually located in Kimberly?
That's correct. Not that I'm aware of.
So whatever oversight he was doing, it was never in person, right?
That's correct.
And before I move on to the next subject, did you discuss your testimony last night with your wife?
No, I did not.
Did you discuss it with anyone else?
No, I did not.
I asked you whether you had reviewed certain transcripts in this case yesterday. What I didn't ask is, did you by any chance watch opening statements in this case?
No, I did not.
Did you read about them?
No, I did not.
Now, going to November of 1998, that's when you had the Blueprint Conference?
Correct.
This Blueprint Conference, Mr. Klug, you can see this is a calendar. It's Defendant's Exhibit 1 for beginning November 1st, going through December 5th. You see that? Mm-hmm. And so that Blueprint Conference is the end of this first week in November, correct?
That's correct.
Your first meetings are on Thursday?
That's correct.
The events you've testified to were principally about Friday night into Saturday morning, true?
Yes, that's correct.
And you're aware that Julie Jensen died on December 3rd, correct?
Correct.
Now, as you indicated on that Friday night, you had a number of drinks and were socializing with other people throughout the night, right?
That's correct.
And around 2 o'clock, there were still a number of people left in the bar, true?
That's correct.
And one of them was you, right?
Yes.
One was Mark Jensen.
Yes.
One was Don Cooper.
Correct.
Ron Ruck was still there.
Correct.
And at 2 o'clock, they shut off the lights to the bar.
2:30, I'm not sure of the actual closing.
So it may have been as late as 2:30?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. And then you had some telephone calls with your wife, correct?
That's correct. After the bar closing, I went back to the room, and the first conversation was with my wife.
Okay. Let me show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 24. Mr. Klug, do you recognize that as a telephone record that you brought to the last hearing that you testified at?
Yes, that's a copy of it.
It's a photocopy of photocopy of a telephone record that you brought to the last hearing, correct?
That's correct.
For your phone number.
Correct.
Your phone number in Appleton, right?
Correct.
I'm going to move Defendant's Exhibit 24.
No objection.
Received.
Actually, I'll let you hang on to that, Mr. Klug. Becky, is the screen on? Well, I have that on. And it didn't.
Why don't you put some in and see what comes up?
I did earlier. And Mr. Klug, that first conversation with your wife, as you indicated, is at 2:34, right?
That's correct.
It's 2 minutes long,
That's correct.
and in that conversation, you had no discussion with your wife about Mark Jensen, true?
That call, from what I recollect, was that I came up, went to call my wife, she called me. So, because it was at the end of the night, like I had said that I would talk to my wife, then at that time, I had told my wife that I was going back down to the lobby of the hotel.
Okay. And that's new information that you hadn't provided to us before, correct?
I don't believe so.
You don't
I don't
believe
believe
it's...
it's new, or I don't believe I provided it to you.
No, I provided that to you because that's what I've been testifying all along.
And again, there was no discussion about any statements Mark Jensen supposedly had made to you, right? Just so we're clear on that? At 2:34. Correct?
At that time, I told her I was going back down.
And so, just so we're clear, absolutely clear, you had no discussion about any statements Mark Jensen supposedly made to you in that 2-minute conversation at 2:34, correct?
No, yes, I did. I believe I said something to my wife about that because we had been talking about, because otherwise how would I know Dawn Cooper was having problems with her marriage? Mark was having problems with his marriage. I went back down there after I talked to my wife.
That's actually not the question. He's asking whether in the initial conversation that you had with your wife, I think that's what you're asking, is whether
Yes.
or not you discussed this business about the defendant's plans.
Nothing about the plans.
And you hadn't heard anything about the plans yet, right?
Not at that time, correct.
And in fact, the bar may not have closed until 2:30, right?
Well, right, because that's 4 minutes after that I went upstairs.
The bar may not have closed until 2:30, right?
That's correct.
And so you may not have had any personal or private conversations with either Mark Jensen or Dawn Cooper as of 2:34, correct?
No, we were talking all night.
Well, Mr. Klug, you've told us that you began having conversations about spouses and things like that after the bar closed, right?
That's correct.
And so you hadn't been having that kind of conversation all night, true?
Well, your question actually to him was whether he had been having, quote, personal conversations.
And I had been with him.
Right. But you hadn't had these conversations about spouses when everybody was there socializing in the bar, true?
I don't believe so.
You didn't have those until after you were alone, correct?
That's correct.
And so that was after you had your conversation with your wife at 2:34, correct?
Correct.
And yesterday you indicated that Dawn Cooper had left by that time, true?
That's correct.
And so she wasn't there when you came back down at 2:34.
That's correct.
So it's just you and Mark and nobody else from Stiefel Nicholas when you get downstairs. Probably, how long does it take you to get downstairs?
About 4 minutes.
Okay, so the phone call ends at 2:36, you're downstairs at 2:40. And
Yep.
is there anything else you do in your room that delays you?
I would have went to the restroom.
Okay, so a few more minutes, is it something like 2:45 when you get downstairs?
I don't know the exact time.
Did you have an agreement with your wife that you were going to talk again that night?
No.
Did you expect your wife to call again that night?
I don't know.
And then you went downstairs and you say you spoke with Mark Jensen alone.
That's correct.
And you say that in this conversation, Mark Jensen mentioned antifreeze, right?
He mentioned, yes, he did.
And he mentioned ethylene glycol to you, right?
Correct.
And he mentioned Benadryl, you say.
Correct.
Now, this conversation when you went down to talk to Mark Jensen, what do you call it? The typical spouse bashing session or something?
Well, it was a bitch session, wife bashing, you know, it was when guys get together and talk.
I don't know about these. How do these work?
Well, the conversation that I had with Mark was at that point was that he was unhappy with his spouse. He was talking about Kelly. He was talking about you know, and then I was talking to him about the fact that I had filed for divorce a year earlier, and that I had moved out for a month, and that, you know, at that point I was unhappy, you know, so it brought back memories from my recent past. And I think Mark felt that he could open up to me about his situation. And it ended up...
Let me focus here for a moment, Mr. Klug. And you began griping about your wife first, right?
I would think, I can't recall.
It was after you had been griping about your wife to Mr. Jensen for a while that he got comfortable talking with you, right?
Correct.
So it was you that was griping about your wife first,
Correct.
right? And you had filed for divorce the previous year.
That's correct.
In 1997?
It was in the spring of '97.
And that's because you had what you called a non-sexual affair with your secretary, right?
That's what I called it, yes.
And was that why you filed for divorce?
Maybe one of the reasons.
And was that why you moved out of the home?
At the time when I filed, it said irreconcilable differences.
Was that why you moved out of the home?
That's correct.
Was it because of your secretary?
That may have been one of the reasons.
In fact, you moved right across the street from your secretary?
That's correct, because we were friends of the landlord, and they allowed me to sign a lease that was a one-year lease, but it could be month to month if I had wanted to break the lease.
And did you think that the apartment across the street from your wife was the only month to month in Appleton?
Objection. How is this relevant, Your Honor?
What is the relevance of this?
Stacy Bauer is going to be a witness in this case, and there's...
And so what? We understand this witness, Your Honor, has talked about this thing with Stacy Bauer. What difference does that make?
It's a motive issue.
Let's, would you mind if I asked you to step out of the room, please?
Sure, yeah.
No, not you, them.
I'm sorry.
Time for some candy, I think, folks. Would you step out, please?
Please all rise.
Want some water?
I can't figure it out.
Oh, there's water in there. You just can't
What's
get it
up?
out.
Judge, the Stacy Bauer was interviewed on August 10th, 2007 by Detective Ratzberg and said, I have no knowledge of a conversation Mark had with Ed Klug in St. Louis regarding killing his wife. Then somehow by the time we got to the forfeiture hearing, she was straying a
Any of that
little.
interview?
What's the date?
Yeah.
August 10th,
All right, go ahead.
2007. And by the time we got to her testimony at the forfeiture hearing, she was straying.
when?
Pardon?
Which was what day?
Late August.
Okay, go ahead.
She was straying from that testimony a bit, and I suspect that her motive may have been to protect Mr. Klug, who had claimed that he had told her these things. In addition, Mr. Klug has sort of waffled back and forth on this fighting with his wife on telephone calls, and this whole atmosphere explains why he is having arguments with his wife and why we picked up on that when he testified, even though we had no notice in advance of it. And frankly, though, Judge, I think this was my last question about the Stacy Bauer thing was, about this, it was at the only place with the month to month, and then I was leaving. Now, I may return to it and just a question here or there about motive or something, but I'm not exploring that relationship much more. And it was brought up on direct that he had this affair. I shouldn't have to accept at face value how he wants to characterize it.
Did you want to respond?
Well, I don't see the point of inquiring into it any further. I mean, he admitted that they were having marital difficulties. He moved out. One of the factors that influenced his decision to move out was this other woman. Why go on and on and on about this? He's exhausted its relevance. He's established the fact that there was this relationship, that he moved out, that they moved back in again. That's the very thing he was talking about with Mark Jensen. I don't see how it's relevant beyond that. And where he lived and how much he was paying for rent and it just doesn't matter. It's just a waste of time. And it's also, I think it seems like it's as though he's seeking to unnecessarily embarrass this witness. It just doesn't seem to make any difference.
Well, and it does have that potential. I'm not saying you're trying to, I'm saying it does have that potential.
And well, I'm not trying to do that, and I don't think I'm going into any real illicit details here that do that. The other thing is, I asked 2 questions. It's hardly going on and on. The other thing is, we're back to the speaking objections. Judge, I think the objection is, Judge, irrelevant. Judge, what does this have to do with anything? It's not relevant. That's a speaking objection. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, no, I don't agree with you that that's a speaking objection. But I do think that Mr. Alby's point is a good one. Irrelevant is the language we speak, irrelevant.
Well, Your Honor.
So you don't have to say, what does this have to do with anything, which is layperson's talk for
But Your
irrelevant.
Honor, I'm a trial attorney. I'm not sitting here in a straitjacket. I'm not permitted. Are there certain words I'm not permitted to use? I mean, there was nothing.
You're being a little combative. At least you were yesterday afternoon. Not overly so. Well, not. You need to be more relaxed in your objections, and I do think that irrelevant does the job. It makes it crystal clear to me what you think.
Very well, Your Honor.
All right. Now, but I'll tell you what. I don't think the jury needs any help when they hear that he rented an apartment directly across the street from this woman. They don't need any help as to whether or not there were any other places he could have rented. So it does, when I balance it against its potential to embarrass the witness, against what information is going to be obtained through an answer to the question, which would be, as you've asked him to answer as briefly as possible, all he has to say is yes or no, and it's not going to add anything to the wealth of knowledge of the jury.
I agree entirely, except for the problem is, I would never have asked if he had just said, did you rent an apartment across the street from her? If he had said yes, I never would have said, was that the only apartment in town? I had to say that because he gave this big, long, dumb explanation about month to month.
Don't comment on
I'm sorry,
no.
that's wrong. Okay, but it's it's the explanation that causes me to point out the fact that that really isn't a very good explanation.
And to that extent, your question's argumentative. So let's not haggle about it any longer. I'm going to sustain the objection. I'll leave it at that. Ask the jury to come back in, please.
Please be seated.
The objection has been sustained.
And so, back to St. Louis, November 7th. That's the Saturday morning, right? November 7th?
Yes, it is.
And you're talking to Mr. Jensen about this affair and the problems you have with your wife.
That's correct.
And it's what you call this spouse bashing.
Correct.
And you were back in your room to receive a phone call with your wife by 3:38, right?
That's correct.
And Did you go back up to make sure you received a call from her?
No, that was when I was done talking with Mark Jensen.
And yesterday you indicated you talked to him from 2:30 until 4 o'clock. It looks like you probably weren't down there until 2:45, right?
I don't know.
Did you say, I don't know?
I don't know. I mean, it takes a few minutes to get from the room back down to the lobby.
Well, you had a 2-minute phone call from 2:34 to 2:36.
Correct.
You went to the bathroom for a couple minutes, and then this was a high-rise hotel?
Correct.
So a couple minutes to come down. Maybe it was 2:43 or something like that.
Correct. I don't know the exact time.
But something between 2:40 and 2:45 seems fair?
Correct.
And then to receive a phone call from your wife at 3:38 a.m., you presumably would have headed back by about 3:30, maybe 3:35, tops, right?
Correct.
And you could have been in your room even before 3:30, right?
I don't recollect.
Okay. But your conversation couldn't have been more than 50 minutes long or so.
Like I've been testifying, it was about an hour long.
Mr. Klug, your conversation couldn't have been more than about 50 minutes long. True?
True.
And antifreeze, ethylene glycol, Benadryl, any other substance he mentioned in this conversation?
No.
Okay. Now, you indicated you talked to Ron Ruck about this the next day, right?
Yes.
You certainly didn't mention antifreeze to him, right?
I don't recollect.
You didn't do it, right?
Is there a way that you can refresh my memory from my testimony of what I had said in the evidentiary hearing?
There is, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
But Ron Ruck, did you?
No.
Did you tell your secretaries about antifreeze?
Yes.
And in 1998, you used the word antifreeze with your secretaries.
Yes.
And you used the term ethylene glycol with your secretaries in 1998?
Yes. That was in Benadryl.
What?
That was in the Benadryl.
And in 2002, you told Quinn Yorton. Did you tell him about antifreeze and ethylene glycol?
Yes, I did.
And you wrote antifreeze in your notes?
I don't have a copy of my notes in front of me.
I mean, you would have written the antifreeze in your notes, right?
I don't know, we have the notes. Is there a way that those could be presented, the evidence?
I'm asking if you recall writing antifreeze in your notes.
I don't recall.
And then when you were, then you made some telephone calls in 2002, correct?
Correct.
To the Pleasant Prairie Police Department?
What I testified yesterday was that my call,
Actually, that's not the question. The
Okay.
question is,
You called the Pleasant Prairie Police Department?
it was not the Pleasant Prairie Police Department.
You testified at the last hearing that it was the Pleasant Prairie Police Department, right?
Yes, I did.
And you testified that you talked to an officer, right?
Yes, I did.
And now it turns out you didn't talk to an officer?
That's correct.
And instead now you're saying that you called the DA's office.
Yes, because I had found the notes.
Mr. Klug, it turns out you talked to a district attorney is what you're now testifying to?
Yes.
And who was the district attorney you spoke to?
I don't recall.
Was it a man or a woman?
It was a man.
And you have no idea who that man was?
No, I don't, because in my notes I wrote DA.
And are you aware of any other man that's been involved in this case other than Mr. Jambois?
I'm not aware.
And you told Mr. Jamboys or some other man in the DA's office at the time simply that you knew Mark Jensen?
Yes.
And you didn't tell them anything about Mark supposedly stating to you that he wanted to kill his wife, right?
No, I did not.
Nothing like that at all, right?
That's correct.
You didn't tell him anything about conversations about ethylene glycol, right?
No, I told him about the fact that Mark was in our office and that he was on our computers.
And he wasn't on your computers in Appleton, right?
Yes, he was.
Oh, in October 1?
When we opened the office, he was in our office.
Wasn't one of the things you were doing that weekend was setting up the computers?
That's correct.
And you've testified before that really all Mark did well, take away the testified before. I don't think this came up yesterday. I apologize. You, in October, all Mark really did was spend time kind of making googly eyes at Kelly, right?
That's correct.
He wasn't on the computer. He was with Kelly, right?
There were computers in the office. That's why I had mentioned that I thought that if there were computers, they needed to check the computers.
Okay. You had never seen Mark on a computer there, right?
No, I didn't.
And did the person from the district attorney's office say, well, why are you calling? That doesn't seem very significant?
No, they were just, that's all they were interested in, the fact that, and at that point, there was no other conversation.
Did they say, well, do you know anything else?
They may have.
And if they did, you said, I don't know anything else?
Yeah, and I, at that point, I was afraid to get involved. I think I chickened out when I had called. It was like, I'm afraid to say anything more.
The answer is you didn't say anything about any conversation.
That's correct.
And you were asked if you knew anything more, right?
I don't recollect.
And at the time that you called in 2002, you had read the criminal complaint, right?
Yes, I did.
That was online, right?
Yes.
And a criminal complaint summarizes the facts that the prosecution is claiming against Mr. Jensen, right?
That's correct.
And you read the newspaper reports, which also summarized what some of the claims were against Mr. Jensen, right?
I don't believe it made our newspaper in Appleton at that time.
But you looked it up online, true?
I may have.
Okay. And in fact, since that time, since 2002 to 2007, you've Googled Mark Jensen's name, right?
Yes.
And you've looked up all the publicity on the case, right?
Like news reports?
Yes.
Yes.
And you followed the legal proceedings, correct?
That's. I followed the Supreme Court decision.
Again, Mr. Klug, you followed the legal proceedings?
That's correct.
And you didn't tell anybody in a position of authority about anything in 1999, right?
You mean,
The law enforcement officer?
No, I did not.
You didn't tell them in 98, right?
No, I did not.
You didn't tell anybody in 2000, right?
No.
You didn't tell anybody in 2001, right?
No, I did not.
In 2002, all you had to say was, I knew Mark Jensen, and we were in the office together, and there's a computer there, right?
That's correct.
In 2003, you didn't have anything to say to law enforcement, right?
No.
2004, you had nothing to say to law enforcement, right?
That's correct.
2005, you didn't have anything to say to law enforcement, right?
That's correct.
2006, you had nothing to say to law enforcement, right?
Correct.
2007, up through July 27th, you had nothing to say to law enforcement, true?
Is the 27th, what day is that?
The Friday before the Monday you testified.
That's correct.
And going back to this conversation with Mark Jensen, during that conversation, you didn't say, Mark, I don't think that would be a good idea to kill your wife, right?
No, I did not.
You didn't say anything to him because you didn't say that, right?
Repeat that question.
He didn't say anything about killing his wife, right?
Yes, he did.
And you had nothing to say about that being a bad idea.
Like I said in my testimony, I thought it was shocking that he was talking like that.
And then when you talked to Mr. Ruck the next morning, you said something in a joking fashion about spouse bashing the previous night, right?
Yes, that's correct. And the fact that Mark was telling me he wanted to kill his wife.
And that's what you're claiming you said to Mr. Ruck.
That's correct.
Now, you testified yesterday that you told your secretaries right when you got back from St. Louis that Mark had said he was planning to kill his wife, right?
That's correct.
You didn't actually, well, and is that your testimony today? Did you tell your secretaries when you got back from St. Louis?
I believe I did, yes.
Well, you're not sure if you did?
Well, you're saying dates and, yeah, I believe I did, yes.
Your first day, Mr. Klug, back in the office was November 9th?
Yes.
Julie Jensen's death was December 3rd, right?
Okay.
Did you, between those periods of time, did you tell your secretaries that Mark Jensen was talking about killing his wife?
Yes.
And you say that you told them that it was antifreeze?
Antifreeze, Benadryl, that's,
Antifreeze, right?
yes,
That's what you've already testified to today, right?
correct.
Do you have some question about that now?
No, you're repeating what I said, right?
And are you recall that last time when you testified, before you testified, you put up your hand and you took an oath, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And the last time you testified, you indicated that you told your secretaries about your conversation with Mark after your wife had died, after his wife had died, true?
Counsel, what page are you?
I haven't read it yet. I was just asking if he recalls that.
Well, you're
Tell me something.
Well, I'm at,
no. The introit to your question said the last time you testified. So at this point, you need to identify when and where.
okay, well, I was asking if he recalled, and then if he didn't recall, then I would read it.
No.
Okay, that's fine if you
Okay.
want it. Okay. Mr. Klug, page 68, line 24, where you ask the following question, did you give the following answer? And is this the first time? Then do I understand that the first time you spoke with your secretaries was after the charges in this case as well? Answer.
Wait, I'm sorry, page 68? On August 30th? What date are we talking about?
Line 24,
July 30th.
page 68, July 30th.
Oh, I got the wrong July 30th. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Line 68, or line 24, page 68, Mr. Klug, where you ask the following question, and did you give the following answer? And is the first time, then do I understand that the first time you spoke with your secretaries was after the charges in this case as well? Answer, no, no, that was something that was talked about after Mark's wife had died. Correct?
Correct.
And you didn't talk to your secretaries until after Mark's wife had passed away, correct?
I guess must be correct.
So now your testimony is that that's when you talked to your secretaries, was after she passed away.
Yes.
And then on July 27th, Ms. Gabrielle here gave you a telephone call, right?
Yes.
And did she talk to you alone first? How many, bad question, how many conversations did you have with prosecutors that day?
There would have been 2 conversations.
And was the first one with Ms. Gabrielle alone?
Yes.
And she indicated that she had heard that you might know something, correct?
That's correct.
And you would never disclose this information to any law enforcement officer, right?
That's correct.
And throughout this period of time, from the time Mark's wife died through the time he was charged, continuing until July 27th, 2007, Mark Jensen's case is pretty well known in the Stiefel-Nicholas world, right?
Yes.
That was something that it was a little bit notorious, right?
Murder is notorious.
So it was a little bit notorious, right?
Correct.
I mean, it was something that you'd frequently talk about at like a blueprint conference or something like that, right?
No.
people would raise the issue, what's going on with Mark Jensen's case, right?
I don't recall.
You don't recall people thinking this was an unusual kind of case, an unusual allegation, and then talking about it because he was part of the Stiefel-Nicholas family?
I don't recall any conversations.
So you didn't talk to anybody from Stiefel-Nicholas between 2002 and 2007 about this case?
In my testimony, I told you that I
Mr.
talked to
hold on.
Mike Conley, who was my compliance officer.
Mr. Klug, I didn't ask about what your testimony was.
You asked if I talked to another person at Stiefel-Nicholas.
That is what I'm asking. And so
And I said Mike Conley.
Okay. I'm just asking the question. So Mike Conley is someone you talked to?
Correct.
And when you talked to Mr. Conley in July of 2007, right?
No, I testified that I talked to him.
Mr. Klug, hold on.
There was two conversations.
Mr. Klug, please hold on.
Ask another question.
I'm not asking what you testified to before because as you just noted, some of your testimony has changed. So I have to ask you.
Object to
Just a
the
minute.
commentary.
Now, just a minute. Both of you lawyers, I'm going to tell you now, ask your questions and be done with it. Is that clear?
Yes?
All right. Now, and you please listen carefully to the question which is asked and confine your answer to that which answers the question.
Yes, Your Honor.
When did you talk to Mr. Conley?
The Friday, the 27th of July.
And that's the first time you talked to Mr. Conley?
That was the second time.
What was the first time you talked to Mr. Conley?
The first time was at a compliance audit of our office. And that was sometime after '02. I don't recall the actual date. He was our compliance officer.
And during this time, did your secretaries tell you not to get involved in this case?
No.
Now, at page 69, beginning at line 4, did you give the following answers to the following questions regarding, page 69, line 4, did you give the following answers to the following questions relating to your secretaries? And then did you speak with them, meaning the secretaries, again after charges were issued, are you saying? Answer, well, yeah, because it was an ongoing situation. Question, and what did they tell you to do? Answer, most people will tell you not to get involved. Question, is that what they told you? Answer, yes.
Okay.
So did they or did they not tell you not to get involved?
Yes. Because that's what's in my testimony.
So the question is not what you testified to on another occasion. Your answer today is to be what is the truth, whether or not it is the same as what you testified on another occasion. Is that clear?
That's correct.
And do you know what the truth is as you sit here today regarding whether they said that or not?
I don't recall.
And do you recall which one of them would have said that?
I don't recall.
Was it both of them?
I don't know.
And now in this first conversation with Ms. Gabrielle on July 27th, 2007, did you tell her that Mark had talked to you about antifreeze?
I talked to her about Benadryl.
Did you talk to her about antifreeze?
I don't recall.
And then you had a conversation later that day with Ms. Gabrielle and Mr. Jamboys.
That's correct.
Did you talk to them about antifreeze in that conversation?
Yes.
And were they taking notes during this conversation?
Objection.
Oh, you were. It was on the phone. I'm sorry. Have you ever seen any notes from that conversation?
No, I have not.
And you knew that this case involved antifreeze since 2002, that was the accusation of the prosecution, right?
That's correct.
That was in the papers and that was in the criminal complaint.
That's correct.
And then You met with them again on Monday morning before you testified, right?
That's correct.
Did you tell them that Mark had said something about antifreeze in that conversation?
Yes, I did.
And then you testified on July 30th. Did you tell us about antifreeze in that testimony?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Klug, were you asked the following question? Did you give the following answer at page 80, line 18? Question. And did he mention any other medications or drugs or anything? And the other refers to Benadryl. Answer, no. The only thing I recall is Benadryl because you know that's the only thing I remember. That's the answer you gave at the last hearing, isn't it?
Okay. Yes, Your Honor.
And you never told the prosecutor before that hearing that this case involved antifreeze, did you?
I don't recall.
The first time you ever said to anybody that Mark Jensen had said anything about antifreeze was yesterday.
Objection, Your Honor. I object to counsel shouting at the witness.
Objections overruled.
Correct?
Repeat your question.
The first time you ever said anything to anybody that Mark Jensen said something about antifreeze was yesterday.
Yes.
Mr. Klug, you testified about some notes yesterday, right?
That's correct.
Those are exhibits S18 and S19. And these notes were made in 2002,
That's correct.
3.5 years after Mark Jensen supposedly had this conversation with you, right?
That's correct.
And you were asked at the last hearing if you had notes, and you said no, right?
That's correct.
And you didn't make any notes at the time of this supposed conversation, right?
That's correct.
And these weren't produced until 2 days ago, right?
That's correct.
You suddenly found these before the trial 9 years later, right?
That's correct.
I object, Your Honor, to...
And I don't want any education going on. This is an important point.
Well, why don't you why don't I take a look at him and then we'll go from there.
And Judge, I can't do it within earshot of the witness.
I can leave the room.
You show him to me?
Oh, I can show it to you, sure. I have copy one.
All right. Just leave it at that until the objection is not timely.
And first, I will move S18 and S19, Mr. Klug's notes, into evidence.
Any objection?
No, I thought they had been, Your Honor.
And Mr. Klug, I give you S18 and 19, which are your notes, correct?
That's correct.
I'm giving you an exhibit that's been marked as D26. Actually, give me that back for a moment. And give me these back for a moment. Apologize. Mr. Klug, when did you write these notes?
Those notes were written in 2002.
What day?
I don't have the date in front of me because you just took it away from me.
Did you, this wasn't like a diary or something?
No, it was notes. Like I testified, they were notes that I made when I talked to the DA's office.
And did you make them before so you'd be reminded of things you wanted to talk about?
Yes.
And you made these notes all at once so that you'd have them in front of you and you could read if you got flustered and could remember?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So they're made all at once, you called the DA, and then you put the notes aside and just found them now?
Correct.
Okay. Now I'll give you back S18 to 19 and D26. Now, Mr. Klug, D26 is a redacted copy, correct? That is, portions are blacked out?
You want one more copy?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
I object, Your Honor, any testimony regarding a redacted copy. I don't see the relevance of having the witness testify. The intact exhibit is there in front of him.
Overruled.
And you've testified yesterday to the entire contents of S18 and 19, correct?
You know, I'm going to interrupt one more time, I apologize,
Sure.
but is there an extra copy of 18 and 19 also? That's just a copy, it doesn't have to be stamped or anything.
Oh, just use the stapler. I think those are in the right order.
Thank you.
And you'll see in your original, Mr. Klug, that most of your notations begin on the left margin. True?
Well, not really. There's notes all over the place.
Okay. You see a number of notes on the left margin. True?
Like I said, there's notes all over the place.
Okay.
That's all right.
I've blacked out certain notes that begin indented or in the middle of the page rather than on the left margin that some other notes are taken, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if without this redacted material, there is nothing in your notes that says anything about Mark Jensen wanting to kill his wife, right?
Objection. What's the relevance, Your Honor? What's the relevance that if you take out the part?
Just let me look.
Question, okay, and if without this redacted material, there is nothing in your notes that says anything about Mark Jensen wanting to kill his wife, right?
That's right.
You're talking about S26?
I think that's D26.
Or, I'm sorry, D. That's correct.
I would move D26, Judge. I want to show that, I want to publish that and then show the comparison to S19 and 18.
I don't see the relevance. I object to its admission into evidence.
We're going to take a break at this point. Please don't talk about the case during the break. It will be 15 minutes or as soon thereafter as you're ready.
Please all rise.
The reason that
And well, I don't know what the court's going to say. I would like to explain what I'm doing without Mr. Klug present, if we get to
Well,
that
let
point.
me just say, the reason I overruled the objection was because I thought that this is something you could do at argument and try to argue something And I thought, how can he object if the witness actually gets a chance to deal with it? So that's why I overruled your objection. Actually, you're in a better position than if he just made an argument about it. Or maybe, we'll see. At least at this point, as the evidence is spread out now. But now it strikes me when you want to show it to the jury that you're starting your argument.
Well, I think
Are you going to ask him more questions about it once it's displayed?
Yes.
All right.
Well, I think she asked more questions before it's displayed. I still don't see the relevance. I suspect I
I'm
know.
going to take him at his word. I'm going to take him at his word that he's going to examine the witness further about it, in which case it would be proper to display it.
Well, Your Honor, first of all, I have an objection to the admission of this evidence because at this juncture it's irrelevant. There's been no relevance established. And I think that before it gets admitted into evidence or shown to the jury, we have to have some reason to know that it's being presented to the jury. And so far, there is no reason. So if he's going to pursue, I understand that he can pursue a line of questioning with this witness in view of the fact that the court overruled my objection. He's showing this to the witness. Now he's got to ask questions about it. And then if the answers to the questions make this thing relevant, well then admit it and show it to the jury. But so far, what's the relevance of this? How is it relevant?
Do you want to respond?
No.
Well, I think his point is a legitimate one.
You know what? I can do this several ways. I'll just do it. I'll just do it a different way if it
Blessed
keeps peace.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
That's right. Just to
All
keep
right.
peace in the court.
All right. Let's take a 10-minute break.
And I would like to.
Two things before we do that. Number one,
I'll say up front, I won't speak to Mr. Klug during the break.
That was
I
my
anticipate
request.
that
all right.
request coming. So.
And actually, there's only one on my agenda. I called the witnesses, or excuse me, the attorneys up during the. I called them up for a sidebar because I saw Lieutenant Ratsberg in the courtroom, and I recall I had seen him yesterday afternoon, and I wondered if he had been excluded from the exclusion order. And apparently by oversight he was not. I think the lawyers confirmed that, but they also agreed that were there an objection made to his presence, that I would probably have ruled that he would be permitted to remain. And so I think we informally agreed that he could remain now and has done so. Is that a fair statement?
It is, although I'll officially register my objection. We went through this at the forfeiture hearing, is why I haven't rehashed it. I do object because I think there's a chance of his testimony being tailored to the testimony of other witnesses, and he's an important witness here. So I do object.
And I'll state, I think, as I said at the forfeiture hearing, that the statute does explicitly prohibit the court from excluding an employee of a party to the action. I'm not sure exactly what the wording is, but basically, and it is true that an employee of the police department of Pleasant Prairie is not directly a state employee. I think that misses the real import of what the legislature said, and in fact, his actions are imputed to the state. And more importantly, however, it makes absolutely no sense if he were a state patrol officer that he couldn't be excluded, but as a Village of Pleasant Prairie police officer could be. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I've permitted him to remain on that basis. Anything else now?
No, Your Honor.
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yep.